All right, welcome back to the Chef Triathlete podcast, where we talk about building strength mentally, physically, and for the long game of life. Today's episode is a special episode. This is going to be a part 2. We have our very special guest, Courtney, back to dig more into menopause, perimenopause, and really get into the technical details. We have a packed agenda today, so I am going to let Courtney jump on, reintroduce herself, and get right into the topics. Hey, Courtney.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me again. The first one was more of that overview, like slow drip, kind of what menopause is a little bit more, but I'd like to really get into the nitty gritty of it because most women don't understand what's going on until there's a problem, right? So for me, I've been coaching for 10 years now, miscellaneous topics, but as of lately, probably the last 2-ish years, I've really started diving into our hormones and how that actually impacts all aspects, our daily day-to-day life, our training, our nutrition, literally everything. And then this past year, I just got certified in menopause coaching. So now that's really where all my attention goes. And of course, last podcast, we got a little bit more into my background. But yeah, definitely lots of experience as far as the different ways you can go coaching wise, and now really honing in on hormones and most likely, midlife women. It still applies to all people, but women, we tend to have more fluctuations and more changes to adjust to. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So basically today, from what I gather, you're really going to take us all the way from the beginning through the whole process to the end and kind of the nuances all in between, right?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. A lot of it is very overview because we are working within more time constraints. So if anyone wanted to do one-on-one coaching, we would definitely go through more in depth, more in detail. But for today's conversation, for the podcast itself, I'd like to try to get in as much detail without overwhelming or brushing over things too much.
Sure.
Right? So there's a little bit of balance. But of course, this is not going to be a one size fits all. I don't have any one answer. But I would like to get into what happens during the cycle, what happens when we start to lose that cycle, or what signs can be, and then also how to combat that a little bit or work alongside this natural process that is going to happen.
Great. I'm super excited. I'm ready to learn, so I'm just going to let you dig right into it.
Awesome. So first and foremost, knowing why the cycle happens or the stages is really, really important. And not just because, women get their period. We know that. We know what menstruation is, but how that plays a bigger picture in your daily life. Because truly, a woman's menstruation cycle is her report card. That is a huge health marker. If age not related and we're not getting our menstrual cycle, or there's a big change, that can be a very large indicator of something bigger that's going on within our body, right? So I want to start at the cycle itself. Now, very simplified, just brushing over what happens, but every body is different, and there are special circumstances, PCOS, endometriosis, if a woman is on birth control, what that might look like, or if she's been on birth control for many years and then comes off. So I want to say a typical menstruation cycle, but I don't want to say normal because every normal is different. So just kind of know that going into it, this is what we're talking about, typical, but there are always going to be specific cases or certain scenarios where things wouldn't apply or they would look a little bit different. But getting back to it, so I just want to put that out there for everybody, but getting back to it, menstruation actually starts in the brain, which was wild to me when I learned that, because it's not just sex hormones, right? Even testosterone, these are produced in the brain first, and then they're sent out throughout the body. So it starts in the brain. Our brain sends off FSH, very simplified again, follicle stimulating hormone. And that then talks to the ovaries. So it's just this pathway, we're ready, basically, is what the brain is saying. We feel healthy enough. We are at a good enough place where we can have a cycle. So the brain goes ding, sends off that message down to the ovaries, and that's where an egg is grabbed and sent off to go through the tubes into the uterus. And then another conversation would be if it's met with a sperm, right? If it's not, we get our cycle. That's when we get our period. It kind of like ejects through the body. We know that, right? We know that that's kind of how it works on a typical cycle, on a typical scale. Now, why it's important to know that this starts in the brain is because if there is an imbalance somewhere, or if your body does not think that you have a safe enough environment to host a fetus, which is what we are biologically meant to do, right? If that does not feel we are ready for it, then that hormone might not get sent. Or we might have a delay, or the quality of our eggs might not be as optimal as they could be. So when we have a lot of inflammation, that's a huge warning sign to our brain and then to our cycle overall. All right. So where this kind of leads into menopause, when estrogen starts to get lower, that's when the brain is a little bit confused, right? Because it has that basically one job. We're supposed to send off eggs. We're supposed to tell this woman that she's ready to reproduce. But we only have so many eggs. Women are born with all of the eggs they'll ever have. Men, you reproduce new sperm every day. It's an astronomical number. It's like 1,500 per day new sperm that you'll produce. Whereas a woman, she's born with all that she'll ever get. I mean, it might be millions. Each woman is different. It might be millions. It might be tens of millions. There's trillion. We don't know exactly how many women are born with what, but what you have is what you get. So if we are highly inflamed, if we make lifestyle choices that don't exactly support healthy eggs, then that can really be detrimental in the long run too. But as those eggs start to drop, whether it's from menstruation or lifestyle choices, so does the estrogen that's produced. So the brain isn't that caught up yet, right? So if you go from 1 million eggs and you lose 1 egg through menstruation, your brain doesn't know that. Mm-hmm. It's not registering that yet. So with perimenopause, when those eggs get to a certain point, when that, say, if you can picture like a jar of marbles, when it gets to a certain point, the brain gets almost frustrated. Well, I'm sending these signals. Why aren't we producing estrogen? Why isn't progesterone being fired off? Why isn't this egg doing what it's supposed to? And then so it will send it off even harder. So these messages, this follicle stimulating hormone goes even harder. Like, come on, wake up, right? And it's reaching for eggs that are diminishing. Mm-hmm. So that's where we start to get like the brain fog, and we can start getting like memory loss. The emotions start kind of going from real highs to lows. Like when a woman feels very low in perimenopause, she feels very low.
Some are suicidal, right?
Yes, actually, like that's when it's the highest suicidal rate is when a woman goes through perimenopause. Mm-hmm. Not so much post-menopause, and we can get to that in a little bit. But yes, between the ages of 45 to 60, that's when we see the highest rate of suicide.
Right. Now, that's fairly new, right? I mean, from what I heard 20, 30 years ago, a lot of women were, the suicide rate was high, and they really didn't equate it to exactly what you're discussing today. This is kind of new information or newer information. Is that right? Or am I kind of...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that goes into the research that's not done
Yeah.
or that's recently done, because women have been going through this since the beginning of time. We just never had a big label on it. It wasn't really discussed at
Hmm.
all, but that correlation wasn't really made. It was like, oh, they happen to because of children leaving the house, or like all these age-related things. Now they're caretakers to their parents. It was bigger other excuses instead of looking at the biological standpoint of the brain actually being involved in menopause, not just say the uterus and the ovaries. It was very narrowed to just the sex organs,
Right.
when really, like we talked about last time, there's over 400 receptors throughout the entire body, including your brain. So yeah, that study ended up coming out more recent about how it's correlated to perimenopause and not just things that come with aging or responsibilities that a woman might be taking on.
Phases of
But
life, etc.
yeah, exactly. But actually what's happening in the brain chemically too. Because estrogen is also very positive. Like, a woman will tell you when she is ovulating, when her estrogen is higher, most women, they feel amazing. Like, dopamine also goes up, our body temperature goes up. We feel good. We feel like we can like take on the world.
Hmm.
Mood increases, sleep is better, deeper, because our body is looking to host, right, to reproduce. But then that does drop. That does come back down. And that's where you'll hear PMS, right? Where you get this low, we're crying over everything, we don't really want to get out of bed. It can be more severe in cases with what's called PMDD. And that can happen really at whatever time, but most women find it's after they have children.
Hmm.
But they'll get these highs, and then on a calendar, you can pinpoint it when it's a low. And that's when estrogen is at its lowest as well. So yeah, that's definitely more so coming out now of why are these suicide rates so high in this one specific age group.
Pretty amazing. It's great information to have, because, like you said, it was just so many years just taught to, like you said, phases of life, stressors in life, and it's great that there are more studies like that out there now. I think it's to give women that understanding that they're not crazy. I guess not that they are crazy, but women do feel crazy during this time, and they can't. A
Yeah.
lot of them up until now really didn't understand why or completely understand why.
Yeah, and honestly, they were treated as crazy.
Yeah.
Like they were given sedatives to get through the day.
Hmm.
And or you would be like locked away before anyone knew what was happening, or that perimenopause was a term and was an actual biological change in that person. Oh yeah, they would pin them as crazy,
Yeah.
and just not listening, or well, it's a part of being a woman. When in reality, we can do things that can help that, you know.
Sure.
So the brain is way more involved than we think, and the brain is the powerhouse. We know that the brain communicates to everything. If you want to go pick something up, your brain is doing that. It communicates to your muscles. So then when it comes to other bodily changes as well, that's all branching from the brain,
Hmm.
and it's affected like that. So yeah, so that's where it kind of starts, that the brain, and then everything else communicates from there. But knowing that we are working with limited eggs, I think can really help women out as to what's happening and why. Because again, the brain needs to adjust to this small decline, this slow decline. If we're only losing one or two at a time out of a million, of course we're not really going to notice that until about 35. We stop producing as much estrogen due to the smaller amount of eggs compared to being 20 years old, right? That's the prime
Yep.
for most people, right? In general, for most people in your 20s, you can do anything, you can have 7 drinks and wake up at 4 a.m. and go to work. You know what I mean? Like, you can pretty much do anything training wise, but then 30 to 40, reality starts to catch up. And again, we're working with that limited jar. And so that number tends to be a lot smaller come your 30s, your 40s, even smaller, right? Now we're talking 50, the average age when women go through menopause or they are postmenopausal. That's when you've got no eggs. Mm-hmm. There's no marbles left in the jar.
So I have a quick question, and it might be a simple question, but for me, it's not. How far into this process can a woman still reproduce?
That is per person,
okay.
Of course. Like that's per individual, because you can have, technically, you could have, say, 50 eggs left, and all it takes is one.
Right.
Truly. It depends on their lifestyle. You can have plenty of eggs left. But if you're highly inflamed, if those eggs are not of good quality, then it doesn't matter that you have 50 left or that you have 1,000 or 100,000. If they're not good quality or you're highly inflamed, then your body does not deem you safe enough to be able to reproduce. But, I mean, you take a woman who's, say, like 45, she hasn't seen the signs, her cycle's still basically the same, maybe some fluctuations. She trains well, she eats well, she's still able to reproduce. So it can happen. It's not impossible, but you can also have someone who goes through it early and then they do run out of their eggs. So that is individual, absolutely, but typically by 55 we are done with our eggs. We have none left.
Gotcha. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So what's next?
So next on the agenda, so that's what I wanted to get into about the brain, because I think so many women, the first symptom they have, even before any cycle changes, is, well, I don't feel right. You don't even know why, right? You can't pinpoint it, but words are kind of hard, like things that you've done all the time. Sleep starts to get a little disrupted. You might find changes in hunger or appetite, but you just don't feel like you. And that's because it is the brain trying to catch up, sending stronger signals, having higher spikes and having lower drops. But we can combat these symptoms, like that increase in body change, hot flushes, the memory loss, having little to no energy. We can combat these things. It's not for sure, hey, because your mother went through these symptoms or you've read online that this happens, that it has to happen to you. We are very much in control. No matter what, if you have ovaries, you're going to go through menopause.
Sure.
At some point, that jar will run out. But your experience doesn't have to be what the next woman is going through, right? Their experiences can be much different. A couple of things that affect that are lifestyle based. As I said, inflammation is super key here because estrogen helps decrease inflammation. But as that goes down, now inflammation starts to creep up. So if we are heavily inflamed going into perimenopause or going into menopause, that estrogen starts to come down. Well, now your body is fighting in a whole new way, because not only your caffeine use or your alcohol or your lack of exercise or fiber, not only is your body trying to combat these things, but now estrogen is decreasing. So inflammation in the heart increases. Your digestive system is also starting to change. That's going to start becoming more inflamed, which can cause a whole bunch of issues. Your body temperature is starting to fluctuate. So if you're already inflamed with your alcohol use and this and that, and you're going to start getting warmer faster because of this estrogen decrease, your body's like, I don't know which one to choose here, right? Like, you got to help me out in some way. So if we can create an environment, aka our body, less inflamed as possible, that's only going to help this process, because inflammation is going to come up. Estrogen comes down, inflammation comes up. And that's why there's an increase in cardiac health is more at risk. Diabetes, we're more at risk for diabetes because insulin gets affected, because again, that's an inflammatory response. So if it can't help control that either, that starts to become an issue. Alzheimer's, again, that's a lot to do with inflammation and the brain is being affected. So that gets increased for women around this time as well. Your collagen, I mean, literally, when I say every part of the body. So collagen becomes stiffer. So we're less mobile because estrogen is decreasing. All of these things are affected by estrogen.
Yeah.
Even though it's pinned as just a sex hormone, it's everywhere. It's inside of our bones. So inside of our bones, there are receptors or conversation. I don't want to say receptors and people not understand what that means. So things that talk back and forth between estrogen and what they are talking to. So kind of like a walkie-talkie, right? It's like a two-way conversation is a receptor, and those are spread throughout the body. But in our bones, we have receptors for estrogen. So that's when we hear about the bones becoming less dense, because now estrogen is not there to help rebuild them or to help them from breaking down. And that's, I think, getting talked about more, which is fantastic, because we do see this huge spike in women getting osteoporosis, hip fractures, ankles, imbalances, like not being able to catch yourself when you fall, or when you do catch yourself, now you broke your wrist. Same thing with like the ankle, you roll your ankle, it would have been a roll, but now it's a break. Right. So that's because estrogen receptors are in bone themselves. So as that decreases, so does the strength, can be the strength of our bone, unless we take action.
Sure. So I had a question in terms of lifestyle, because we know the obvious, right? We know not only with women but with men. If we talk about substance abuse and not taking care of yourself and things like that. But I think there's one topic that not maybe everyone understands that can be just as negative, especially right now with social media and everything, and aesthetics being so important. And women need to have a healthy percent of body fat on them, because when their body fat gets too low, it actually affects a lot of the things that you're speaking about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, just being well-rounded, lifestyle-wise. But yes, if your body thinks that there's a threat, if your brain thinks that there is a threat, that can be from super low calorie that we've talked about. That can be from body fat, living in a high stress situation, lifestyles choices that bring in stress and danger, even high stress jobs, or if you don't know how to manage your stress, that can do it. But certainly trying to look a certain way by making extreme cuts or under recovering, like really training super hard, not giving your body that rest, that's a threat. All those are things that are threatening to the body to be able to reproduce. So when we have that low body fat percentage, or too high as well, it does go both ways, and we start to see the cycle being affected, that's because it's the first red flag of, this is an unsafe environment. We don't need this cycle, but we need to be able to have enough calories for our lungs to breathe, for our heart to beat. So there's actually a term for it. When an athlete is too low in body fat and she loses her cycle, that's called being amenorrheic. Okay. So when you completely don't have your cycle for I'm not talking like you go from 28 days to 45 day cycle, but you get it. But women will go like 3 to 6 months and they're happy that they don't have their cycle, But that is huge. That is something else is not lining up well. And you're probably going to start to see other things be affected too. Thyroid starts to come in, more sicknesses, and then we're breaking down instead of staying strong. And that's where the line does get drawn of these GLP-1s and, you know, the skinny coming back in, because, and, you know, Hollywood and stuff, because if it's not monitored and we're not having other tools being used, lifting weights, having adequate protein, making sure that we're having fiber and vegetables. Like if you're not taking care of your body and you're just losing weight, you're just losing muscle, that's when it's incredibly scary, because those things will probably start to decline anyway. I mean, women are at their peak bone mass at 35. That's only going to get worse as we age. So if you're not having strong bones now because you're trying to have a certain aesthetic look and just be thin, what's going to happen at 45 if we don't take action to help build those back up with muscle and training and proper protein?
Yeah, I actually heard that not all, but a good amount of elderly, you mentioned that, when elderly fall, they break a bone. But I heard that there's some studies that the bone broke before they fell, and that's why they fell, because their bones were so weak and brittle, which was really interesting. So it's not always the fall that breaks the bone. Their bones may be so weak that bone gave out, and that's what caused the fall, which is yeah. So it's like you said, it's so important to prioritize that stuff as we age.
Oh, absolutely. And protein is a huge factor in that, because as we age, men and women, but it's more, again, this conversation is more for women, but it's more severe because of menopause. But our protein synthesis, or the ability to use protein or utilize it, goes down as we age. So a person who's 40, they can have their 180 grams of protein, or they try to like measure out 3 ounces of protein on their plate. Their body's gonna be like, oh, great, let's use it, right? Let's put it to the muscles that were already worked. Let's grow some hair, let's grow nails, let's use this. But someone who's 65, they can have that same amount of protein, and their body's gonna be much slower at trying to use it, or not use it as well, simply because of aging. And then of course you throw in the lack of estrogen in women, that decreases even more. That process gets even slower. And of course, as we age, our appetite's not always as prominent. Our taste buds change, right? We don't need it as much. We're most likely less active. We're not walking more. We're not chasing children anymore. You know what I mean? Like you start to see this inactivity hit, or a person thinks, well, I'm 60, I can't do X, Y, Z. So they rule it out, right? Simply because they had a birthday. They reached a certain age and they gave up on their health, or, something like that. So now this person their body doesn't think they need as much protein. And so you got age, that the lack of protein synthesis on them, and you've got the inactivity. So when it finally does get protein, it's very slow into putting it into the right places. So that's why it's very, very important, one of the reasons, to make sure that we get protein every meal, every day.
Sure.
Bare minimum. And then you add in training too, and then that requires even more.
Yep. And then you mentioned collagen. So other than diet, are there any type of supplements, or what can women do to improve that collagen production, or to, kind of, I guess, navigate through that challenge as well?
Honestly, staying mobile.
Okay.
Staying mobile, because when estrogen drops, your muscles actually or your collagen decreases, so we get more stiff, right? You get up in the morning like, oh God, I can't move here, or whatever. You hear that all the time. So if you just keep going and adding in mobility training, stretching, blood flow, that is going to go such a long way. And you can get those things back, even if someone hears this and like, oh wow, I really got to start working on my mobility. I don't want to get more stiff. I'm already feeling it. Of course, you can't just jump right into advanced yoga, but you can start to implement small changes and just working through a range of motion to your sticking point, and then eventually that will ease up. You can still retrain that. But, other than having adequate protein, making sure that, you can have plenty of fiber to decrease the inflammation and those things we talked about earlier, mobility and just keep moving.
Yeah.
That's the biggest advice that I would give. Yeah.
Great. So, how do women mitigate all of this? You talked about the brain fog. You talked about a lot of the things they're going through as they get into menopause. Let's dig into a little bit more of things they can do to kind of help with that. I don't know if there's suggestions to deal with the hot flashes, any of those things.
Yeah. So first and foremost, whatever is in your control is what I would capitalize on. Sleep is going to be numero uno. Getting adequate sleep. And I know, especially for you as well, like this is huge for everybody. And no matter what you are doing, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to build muscle, all the things, sleep. If you're trying to improve your mood, sleep is number one. If someone's sleep is total trash, they can try everything else in the book and it's not going to add up nearly as well as they want it to be. So I would really focus on sleep, which I know can be hard because we have the night wakes, whether it's a hot flash or whether it's because the bladder and stuff is affected. So then you feel like you got to pee in the middle of the night. I understand that, but there's also things to do that we most all know of. Not being on your phone in bed, trying to settle down the half an hour before, doing these small steps, sleeping in a dark, cool room, especially if you do have hot flashes, having a fan in there, having a window crack, making your environment a sleeping environment.
My bedroom has been 58 degrees with fans on for I don't know how long now.
If that's what she has to do.
Yeah.
A big thing too with that is protein. Protein is kind of the answer for all things. But a diet higher in carbohydrates is going to send that blood sugar to spike and come back down. So that is also going to be your body metabolizing, not just because estrogen is decreasing, but also because you're giving it that extra sugars. So I would say like the 3 to 4 hours before bed, try to avoid really eating much at all, but especially if you're having those things happen at night, no carbohydrates. And when I say that, I do still mean like oats and potatoes, not just like sweets, ice creams, cookies, but trying not to eat 3 to 4 hours before bed because you still digest during the night. So that means your body has to heat up, and that means you are going to get blood sugar spikes, even just you think you're getting solid sleep, but you're really not. Like you're not entering those deep REM states because your blood sugar is going up and down because you're on a full belly going to bed.
That's a good call out. And I would imagine the same with, someone that likes to enjoy a glass of wine with dinner at night. Would alcohol kind of have that same effect?
Alcohol affects everything, but yes, that's the worst thing to have before bed, would be alcohol. I know like the traditional, just a nightcap. Well, you think you're sleeping well, you're not. That is your body is doing the ultimate detoxing while you are trying to sleep. And then it throws off your body temperature. It's going to throw off your sleep cycles, when you go in and out of what. And then, the liver's trying to play catch up. It's trying to get all of that out of there. You're dehydrated. Yep. So now your muscles are also affected, your brain, all that. So alcohol has got to be the number one inflammatory if I was to pick one.
Yep.
Alcohol use and then caffeine would be a close second.
I agree. One other thing you mentioned, actually, and my wife has just recently started dealing with this, is having to pee all the time. Mm-hmm. Is there any tips, or is that just something that kind of has to be worked through?
A little bit of both, because there is a whole section of the bladder and the intestines that's being affected by this decrease in estrogen. So, and her pelvic floor is also going to be affected because of the connective tissue. Again, going back to collagen being affected. So that will happen. And especially perimenopause, this is a transitional time. So postmenopause, 10 years down the line or whenever she stops getting her cycle, she will find that a lot of these symptoms just go away because her body's now adjusted. But this weird in between of adjusting, it is partly of just going through it, but also if she drinks the bulk of her water during the day and then maybe has some at dinner, but doesn't have any after, that will also help immensely. But yeah, some of it is just, you have to go through it. Now, the other side of that, if someone is going to go out to dinner, have some drinks, then yes, I would want you to finish off with at least a glass of water to help combat that dehydration that's about to happen, that's going to keep you up. So really it's a catch-22, but if on average she could have most of her water before dinner, that can help.
Right. Awesome. So what really is, or what are the telltale signs? And if we went over this, I'm sorry, but how do you know when you made that switch from perimenopause to menopause? And then what does that look like in terms of, a lot of the symptoms, I guess, and things that you're going through?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually, because not a lot of women really know. They just think, oh, menopause, and that's it, right? Like they just make it one term. But luckily, we're starting to know more about it. So typically, if you are starting perimenopause, again, varies, but we're going to say the start is 35 when we start to see the decline of estrogen. Probably won't notice much at all, but it starts around 35 and then it can go all the way up to 50. And the first things you'll probably feel are mental, like that I don't feel like myself sort of bit. But then what your doctor will tell you is the cycle changes. So if a woman goes from, I am 30 days on the calendar forever and ever, and now all of a sudden I'm either getting it sooner. So now she's getting it at 25 days or 22 days, or much later. Now I'm 40 days out. This is odd. Or the cycle itself. Now all of a sudden it's very heavy, all the intense, I'm getting migraines and this cramping, the symptoms are very intense. That can also be a sign. And that only starts to get of a wider range. So it either comes very early or later. You start to notice and more symptoms, right? That starts to intensify. So that's typically until age 50-ish. And then the average age for menopause is going to be 50 and above. So scientifically, or your doctor will say, oh, congratulations, you're in perimenopause, high five. Here's all the things, but we're not going to actually help you. But you're in this stage of life. Then your next visit, they ask, or you tell them, hey, I got my period on this day, and I haven't seen it in about a year since. So once you go a full year with nothing, no cycle at all, that's when they say, congratulations, you're in menopause or post-menopausal. Because you've then stopped, all of your eggs have run out, all of the marbles in the jar are gone. So now you're in this world of post-menopause, and that's you now for the rest of your life. That is until you are no longer here. Most women by that point, mid-50s, 60s-ish, when they have no more cycle, they feel like themselves again. Because they kind of are in a different way, older, life changes. But now they're not feeling all these weird in-betweens because their brain has adjusted. It's now caught up with this lack of estrogen. So now it's like, oh, let's be in peace again. Now we're back to a homeostasis. Now everything is going to run because we're now adjusted to this new capacity instead of trying to send out those stronger signals, instead of trying to get estrogen to produce, get these eggs to move. The brain's finally like, oh, maybe we don't have to do this anymore. And so usually on average, it's 50 and above that you're postmenopausal and life becomes bright again.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Um, so so you personally, with all the studying and all the certifications and things, what are you doing now to work with women to kind of help them through this? Like, what does your kind of coaching look like? What are you offering for services that can kind of help women to navigate through this?
Yeah, so this is the fun part now that we've talked about all the horrible. So one thing I do want to add though, once a woman is postmenopausal, she is still at heavy risk for cardiac disease,
Mm,
diabetes, and sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, and then osteopenia, which is bone loss or bone density loss. So that's still very prevalent. So what I do with my clients now, depending on where they are, um, in all of their training, I am including jump training, which can look very different, and this can be for any level at all. That can look like jumping jacks, a very small box jump, a high box jump, jumping rope or skipping rope, really jumping lunges, things that you wouldn't think are included in jumping, but that send the body a message to say to build stronger bones.
mm,
And that happens from impact. Medicine ball throws. So just picking up a medicine ball and slamming it on the ground, slamming it into a wall, like those create impact. And impact tells the body to create denser bones. It sends a message. So jump training across the board at whichever level, that's for our bones. Having some sort of like hand-eye coordination or like agility training. So for me personally, I like to add in boxing. And again, whether you're a crazy athlete or it's your first day, you can safely throw a punch. No one said it had to be hard, but just to extend your arm and bring it back, right? That's all I'm looking for.
mhm,
Even better if you can throw it hard, if they don't have a history of osteopenia or bone density loss. But if they do, or if they are at that age, then no, I'm not going to have them hit a heavy bag hard. But we can do it in the air. We can just do that. So it's getting your brain to move along with the limbs outside of that. Definitely heavy lifting with a little asterisk off the side within reason.
mhm.
So form and safety are absolutely priority, no matter what. And everyone's heavy is relative, right? Like my heavy is not the same as your heavy for many different reasons. So what I would say to someone who's trying to figure out what their heavy is, lifting a weight or creating some sort of resistance, even if it's body weight, that say you do 10, you might be able to do like 13 before form starts to get sacrificed or
Mhm.
before the effort is just too hard. So that's your heavy. That might be 100 pounds, and then for someone it's 10 pounds. But if they pick a number, you want to save about 2 to 3 in that tank to be able to still do well. But if you can do another 20 on top of that number that you just selected, that's way too light. Way too light. So we do need that feedback. We need that resistance to create the healthy muscle, to create the healthy bones too. And then mobility, like we already talked about.
Mhm.
So if we're going to look at a full week for someone training, definitely walking every day or most days. Again, that's going to help lower inflammation, is just at least walking. So keep that mobile, keep that blood going. Stretching at the beginning or end of a session, that's all in one day, really, if you think about it. Lifting, I'd say 3 days a week at minimum, lifting weights. Body weight counts, does
Mhm.
not have to be just all weights. Have resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. And then I would say, 1 to 2 days of aerobic activity where you're really getting your heart rate up. But all of that is going to include jump training, plus your mobility, your agility, hand-eye coordination. So you only really need like 4 or 5 days of real solid activity. And then nutrition-wise, it's going to be sleep first and foremost, and getting getting the inflammation down, which is most likely looking at protein intake and fiber.
Mm-hmm.
Fiber. I think fiber, honestly, is the big miss. I think society right now is so focused on protein that fiber gets shoved off, but it does so much for us. And especially these women who have these big spikes, the brain is sending out these big spikes or these very low lows. Fiber can help with that because fiber, and I know we're getting close to time, but
we're good.
Fiber creates that good gut bacteria. And that gut bacteria is directly connected to your brain. So if we can eat lots of vegetables, our greens, even our healthy starches, banana, potatoes, carrots, all those things, but just ask yourself, how can I add fiber to this meal? And I think that will go so far. How can I add fiber and how can I add protein? And then the rest will kind of just fall into place.
Yeah, I think fiber is a good call out. I think once again, it's marketing, right? Protein is everywhere. There's protein chips, protein cookies, protein drinks, protein this. Now you go to Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Now they have protein lattes, and it's just the focus is all protein. And you're right. But if you had a list, like really quick, like 5 foods that would be high in fiber that people can easily incorporate in their diet that they might not think of, like what would you rattle off quickly?
Well, I would say berries.
Mm-hmm.
So berries in anything, you can add that to a smoothie. You can add that to your yogurt. You can add it to your cereal. You can even add it into your ice cream. So berries go anywhere. And I'd say greens as well, not just lettuce because it's mostly water-based. But if you can cook your eggs with some spinach, if you can throw in some tomatoes in there, or if you can have a side salad before you have your dinner, spinach, kale, those things. If you can toss a few leaves on your burger before you eat it, or throw some into your smoothie, disguise it. That's a big thing with me. I like things to be disguised. I will eat raw spinach, don't get me wrong, but I can't do it all the time every day. But if I can throw it into something and just disguise it, all the better. So dark leafy greens are going to be first and foremost. Berries would be your good little like sweet. And then, things like bananas or potatoes, those are going to be a good source of fiber that will also give you the satisfaction of like a carb, like a heavier carb and fill you up a little bit longer.
Awesome. So increase your fiber, try to stay away from the carbs at night, and you'll be in better shape.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all the better for it. It seems like a lot, but it really does go back to our basics.
Yeah,
it really does. Get outside, do some movement, resistance train, and eat your protein and veggies.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think we got into a lot. I appreciate you coming back. I appreciate you getting a little more technical into this topic and in the passion that you show for it. If you just want to rattle off real quick one more time how people can get in touch with you if they're interested into digging into this more and getting some training possibly.
Yeah. So Instagram is probably where you'll see most of the things that I post about this, whether I share it on my story or whether I actually make a big post about it. So that's going to be warrior_train, TRAN, and then underscore again, F as in Frank, IT. So fit. So warrior_train_fit.
Awesome.
A lot of underscores there. But yeah, that's mostly where I'll post about it. Random videos or facts, things of that nature, training a lot too, and how to modify training when we assume we can't do something. If we're already very inactive or we have an existing issue, you can still work around those things. It might just look different, but there's no reason to not try. No one is stuck in their situation or written off because you're a certain age. Absolutely not. Yeah. It is just a number, and I truly believe that.
Yeah. What is that saying you said on the last show? A little of something is better than a little of nothing, or something along those lines?
Close. All or something, not all or nothing.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on again. I appreciate it. It was great information, and hopefully we'll have you on for another topic sometime soon.
Yeah, of course. All you know me, I got a ton up here. So.
Yeah.
Always happy to share. And if anyone does have more specific questions, they can always reach out to me or reach out to you, and you can kind of be that middleman for us. But I don't want anyone to feel left in the dark, husbands, wives, or otherwise. We definitely want to make sure that people deserve to know this information. It's their health, and they deserve to know that they are in their own power.
Yep. It's an amazing topic. Thank you again, Courtney. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
I'll talk to you later.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.